What is the difference between science and philosophy? Is one a subset of the other, or are they distinct?
I would personally say that science is kind of a subset of philosophy because um, science does ask questions that are technically in the realm of philosophy, but they just go a step further. And it really started off with most of science got started off with philosophers. Like, I mean, if you look at people like Aristotle,
Mm-hmm.
his whole entire big realm was biology at first, and then he started following around with Plato, and got into the whole entire philosophical areas of it, and he like that's what his biology background is what influenced his philosophy on things. But like the only reason why he started doing any of that is because he was like, hey, how does this actually work? How do these organisms function? Like, what do they do? And so these are philosophical questions.
What do you think, Dave?
I think science is pretty much its own thing now. I'm not sure it could be called a subset of philosophy. Like, there's an intertwining of the two subjects, but it's very limited, and most scientists can get on with doing science without actually involving any of the philosophical literature.
What do you think, Barry?
I think science is definitely a subset of philosophy. I think it is the branch of philosophy concerned with measurable things, and that it should come as no surprise that it has little to say to any other branch of philosophy which is not concerned with those things.
What do you think, Albie?
I'm going to be closer to Dave on this one.
Wrong.
They're pretty distinct.
You're just wrong, Robert. Dave and y'all are just wrong.
You can actually see certain philosophers make this point that are on the pragmatist and naturalist side. You have Peirce and Dennett and the Churchland couple. They reject that knowledge is like metaphysics and epistemology are first knowledge from an a priori perspective. They reject that. You can.
I'm sorry, that was a lot of jargon. Can you repeat?
Yes, it was. So metaphysics is like, it has to do with like what is and also like identities and stuff like that. Whereas epistemology is the study of how we know things. And these philosophers reject that you can sit in a chair and start there with your philosophy. You actually, science ends up being that you're bombarded with your sense data first before you start making sense with your philosophy.
So I'm going to be the oddball out. I'm going to disagree with everybody. And not only am I going to say that neither are a subset of the other, and not only can neither exist without the other, they are actually the same thing, and our human brains are just subclassing them because they kind of have different sets of what job they're doing. And by job they're doing, I mean the literal people. The philosophers are doing this part of a job, and the scientists are doing this part of a job. They are both utilizing each other's basis that they've put down, but we've made it far enough in philosophy, in science, that our the base of our structure is well enough in place that everybody doing philosophy and everybody doing science is within this initial framework. And so because this initial framework has been established, everybody inside that framework is already using both science and philosophy in that space. So they don't have to bother with asking, like, does gravity function anymore. They don't have to bother with some of these questions that initially had to be asked and answered before we could move forward. So both science and philosophy are ostensibly at this point doing more niche things in little areas, but they're ultimately the same thing until you get at least one weirdo out there that's just talking about something completely different.
So Dave and Opie are wrong, and Chesh is just even more wrong than they are.
Yeah, let's go.
I could probably agree with even more. Part of it has to do with like what we mean by these two words.
No.
And because we're talking about
no nuance ever. Oh, Opie.
Sorry.
We're talking about science and philosophy now in our modern age, rather than trying to date it back to when it was the same thing. And that same thing dates back before probably Aristotle. So it's before we even had written language at that time.